My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and last Friday I stood at my father's funeral surrounded by people who used to call me family. They laughed at me, saying I only came back for the money. But then, the lawyer played a video that no one expected. In it, my father revealed a shocking secret, exposed a traitor, and left all his assets to the person the family despised the most. That was me. Where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. You won't believe how my family's smug faces changed when they heard my father's last words. So let me take you back to the beginning of that day. The day I walked into my father's funeral and knowing I was no longer welcome. The church was already full when I arrived. The front pews were packed with familiar faces, but not a single one turned to greet me. I wasn't late. I wasn't early. I was just unwanted. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and whispered judgments. I could feel them, those sidelong glances, the murmurs that followed me as I walked down the aisle. She hasn't been home in years. What's she doing here? Bet she's sniffing around for the money. I slid into a middle pew, my hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking. Up front, my older brother Lucas held court like some grieving king. His hand rested on Aunt Valerie's shoulder, his face a perfect mask of sorrow. Oh, he was good. The perfectly knotted tie, the practiced sniffle. Lucas was playing the part of the devoted son to a T, but I knew better. That little curl at the corner of his mouth when he saw me? That wasn't grief. That was victory. The organ swelled and the service began. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. Soft music, warm words, a slideshow of my father's life flickering on a screen above the altar. Smiling photos of him with Lucas, with the company he built, with everyone. Except me. Each image felt like a tiny cut, a reminder of how I'd been written out of this family long before today. Then, Lucas stood to give the eulogy, and my stomach knotted. I braced myself, and oh, was I right to. He painted a picture of him and Dad as this unbreakable duo. Late nights at the office, fishing trips, heart-to-hearts. It was a fairy tale, and I wasn't in it. Worse, he made sure I knew it. Even when some walked away from this family, he said, his eyes flicking back to me for just a second, Dad stayed strong, because loyalty was everything to him. The words landed like a slap. The church was silent, but I could feel every stare burning into me. I was the traitor, the one who'd walked away. Never mind the truth, never mind why. By the time the service ended, I was ready to bolt, but the reception was worse. Lucas cornered me by the coffee urn, his two loyal cousins flanking him like bodyguards. "Enjoying the show?" he asked, his voice all venom wrapped in silk. "Must be nice to waltz back in and act like you belong." "I'm here to say goodbye to Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed, short and cruel. "Please, you're here for the will, but let me save you the trouble. You're not getting a dime." A few heads turned. Someone snickered. Uncle Ray leaned in, his voice loud enough for the room. "Maybe she should just go. Not really family anymore, is she?" They laughed. At my father's funeral, like I was nothing, like I'd never been his daughter. I almost did it. I almost walked out that door and let them have their story. But something stopped me. A spark of anger, a whisper of defiance. I looked Lucas dead in the eyes. "I'm staying," I said. He was my father, too. He smirked, stepping closer. "Sure, stay. But don't hold your breath for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "The will reading," he said, his voice dripping with smug certainty. "Dad made it crystal clear. You're out. Not a cent." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, the weight of every stare pressing down. But what Lucas didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Dad hadn't just left a will. He'd left something else. Something that would turn their perfect little narrative upside down. And by tomorrow, they'd all hear it straight from him. I used to think I understood what family meant, that it was something unbreakable, even when imperfect. I believed love could weather anything. Fights, distance, even time. But I learned the hard way that love can be rewritten, reputations twisted, and truth smothered under silence. My silence, more than anything, was what cost me my father. I believed love could weather anything fights, distance, even time. But I learned the hard way that love can be rewritten, reputations twisted, and truth smothered under silence. My silence, more than anything, was what cost me my father. There was a time when I wasn't the family outcast, when I was just Ellie Bird, the girl who saw stories where others saw concrete. Dad got it. He'd find my scribbles, stick figure cities sprawled across napkins or the backs of his blueprints, and grin like I'd handed him gold. "You've got a spark, Ellie Bird," he'd say, tucking one of my drawings into his wallet. "You see the world different." Those words were my anchor, proof that he saw me. Our best days were quiet ones. Saturday mornings at Lake Michigan, fishing poles in hand, the water whispering secrets we didn't need to speak. That silence wasn't empty. It was warm, safe, a language only we shared. He taught me to cast a line, to wait for the right tug, to trust the moment. "Life's about timing, Ellie," he'd say, his voice steady as the lake. "Wait for the pull, then act. Not too soon, not too late." I hung on to those lessons, thinking they'd carry us forever. But forever ended when I was 16, the day I chose art over Carter and Sons. Lucas, my older brother, was Dad's shadow, learning contracts, charming investors, memorizing the business like it was his birthright. I was the dreamer, my bedroom walls covered in sketches, my heart set on canvases, not construction sites. When I got into the Rhode Island School of Design, I was over the moon. I thought Dad would be too. I told him at dinner, my hands shaking with excitement. "I got in, Dad. Full scholarship. I'm going to be an artist." His fork stopped midair. His face hardened like I'd betrayed him. "You'll say no," he said, his voice cold as steel. "Carter and Sons is your future." "No," I said, my voice small but firm. "I want this. It's who I am." He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "I didn't build an empire so you could waste it on paint and daydreams." Lucas didn't speak, but that smirk, God, that smirk said everything. He'd been waiting for this, my misstep. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, smooth as ever. "I'll keep the business strong. I won't let you down." His words were a promise, but they felt like a blade, slicing me out of Dad's vision. That night, our bond didn't just crack. It shattered. I became the rebel, the ungrateful daughter who turned her back on the family legacy. But Lucas didn't stop there. He saw the fracture and made it his mission to widen it. When I left for college, I tried to hold on. Every Sunday I'd call, leaving voicemails when no one answered. I sent letters with sketches, hoping Dad would see them and remember his Ellie Bird. I emailed photos of my paintings, invited him to my exhibitions. At first, his replies were short. "Busy week," or "That's nice." Then nothing, just silence. What I didn't know was that Lucas had become the gatekeeper of Dad's heart. He deleted my voicemails before Dad could hear them, tossed my letters in the trash, forged curt emails signing them as Dad, telling me he was too disappointed to care. He told Dad I'd stopped reaching out, that I was too wrapped up in my bohemian life to bother. He even hid the invitation to my first gallery show, the one I'd poured my soul into. "Dad's not coming, Emily," he said over the phone, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "He doesn't think it's worth his time." I believed him. And worse, Dad believed Lucas. Why wouldn't he? Lucas was there, pouring coffee at board meetings, driving Dad to site visits, filling every gap I'd left. He was the loyal son, while I became a ghost, a disappointment with paint-stained hands and no place in the empire. The family bought Lucas's story too. Aunts stopped calling, cousins unfriended me. Even Dad's old partners, who once called me Little Architect, started looking past me at reunions. There was one phone call I still can't forget. It was during my senior year. I had just sold my first piece. I called Dad, bursting with joy. "Someone bought my painting," I said. "It's going to be on display next month." Silence. Then he said, That's nice. Lucas just closed a multi-million-dollar downtown project. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That's great. He sighed. You chose your path, Emily. Don't expect it to pay dividends. That was the last full conversation we ever had. I didn't stop reaching out, but I did stop hoping. And yet, part of me still dreamed that one day, he'd show up. Just walk into a gallery, stand before one of my paintings and say, I'm proud of you. He never did. Instead, one rainy morning, I got a call from Mr. Dawson. Emily, he said gently, I'm sorry to inform you. Your father passed away last night. I didn't cry. Not right away, because grief doesn't hit all at once. Sometimes it's slow, numbing. I packed a bag, bought a train ticket, and stared out the window the entire way to Chicago, trying to remember the last thing I ever said to my father and whether he ever truly heard me. The train to Chicago carried me closer to his funeral, but it also carried my grief, my guilt, and a growing rage. Lucas hadn't just let us drift apart. He'd orchestrated it, brick by brick, lie by lie. And Dad had died believing I didn't care. Tomorrow, I'd face the family that had cast me out, and the will reading, where Lucas swore I'd get nothing. But Mr. Dawson's voice echoed in my mind, his cryptic pause when he'd said, Be there, Emily. It's important. Something told me Dad hadn't forgotten his Ellie bird. Maybe he'd left more than silence. Maybe he'd left the truth. And tomorrow, I'd find out, no matter how much it hurt. The train to Chicago felt like a journey back in time, each rain-streaked window pane blurring the present into the past. The city waiting at the end of the tracks wasn't the one I'd grown up in. It was colder, sharper, a place that had carved me out of its heart. The weight in my chest grew heavier with every mile, a mix of grief and dread that made breathing feel like a choice I wasn't sure I wanted to make. Home. The word tasted bitter now. Chicago hadn't been home in years, not since the last visit when I'd slunk away after too many tight-lipped smiles and too much silence. I hadn't seen Dad in nearly 2 years, not face to face. The thought of it, of all the moments we'd never get back, clawed at me as I stepped off the train at Union Station, my bag heavy in my hand, my heart heavier still. I called Lucas the second my feet hit the platform. First call, no answer. Second, same. Third, voicemail. On the fourth, he finally picked up, his voice clipped like I was an inconvenience. What is it, Emily? I'm busy. I just got to Chicago, I said, forcing my voice steady. I came as soon as I heard about Dad. Why didn't you call me yourself? He sighed, sharp and impatient. Because I've got a million things on my plate. Funeral plans, the house, Dad's estate. Someone's got to step up. The jab landed, but I swallowed the hurt. Where's the funeral? St. Augustine's, Friday, 10 a.m., he said, like he was reading a schedule. That's 2 days away. Shouldn't we wait? Give people time to... It's done. He cut me off. It's what Dad wanted. As if I'd know what Dad wanted. No one had told me he was sick, let alone dying. Can I stay at the house? I asked. A pause long enough to sting. Uncle Robert and Aunt Valerie are already there. Get a hotel. Not a yes, not a no, just a dismissal. Then the final twist of the knife. There's a family gathering tomorrow night. Immediate family only. Immediate family. The words sliced through me. I wasn't invited. Not to the house, not to the gathering, not to the family I'd been born into. I hung up, my throat tight, and checked into a tired little inn off Clark Street. The room smelled of stale coffee and old carpet, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to say goodbye to a father I'd lost long before he died, and to face a family that had already buried me. The next morning, I walked to the funeral home alone, my steps heavy under a gray sky. The director, a kind-eyed man with a soft voice, led me to a private viewing room. There was Dad, lying still in a pressed suit, his hair combed neat, his hands folded like he was waiting for a meeting to start. He didn't look gone, just absent. Like he might open his eyes and call me Ellie Bird one last time. Hi, Dad, I whispered, my voice breaking. I sat beside him for nearly an hour, spilling out everything I'd held back for years. I told him about the gallery show in Brooklyn, how I'd painted a cityscape that reminded me of his buildings, about the mural in Queens that took 3 months and left my hands blistered, about the day I saw one of his skyscrapers in a magazine and sobbed in a coffee shop, missing him so much it hurt to breathe. I'm sorry, I said, tears falling. I'm sorry we lost each other. I tried, Dad. I swear I did. That night I called Claire, my best friend in New York, the one person who'd never let me feel invisible. They're having a family gathering and didn't invite me, I said, my voice trembling. I feel like I'm trespassing at my own father's funeral. That's bullshit, she said, her voice fierce. Do you want me there? You don't have to do this alone. I hesitated, then whispered, yes. Claire arrived the next morning, her presence a lifeline as we walked into St. Augustine's. The church was packed, every pew filled with faces I'd known my whole life, yet none of them met my eyes. Lucas sat front and center, polished and poised, soaking up condolences like a king receiving tributes. He didn't glance my way. No one did. Claire and I slid into a middle pew, the whispers trailing us like shadows. She's only here for the money. Never even visited him. Bet she's kicking herself now. Each word was a needle, pricking at the grief I was already drowning in. I wanted to scream, to tell them I'd called, written, begged to be let back in. But what was the point? Lucas had rewritten my story years ago, and they'd all bought it. The priest spoke of Dad's legacy, his construction empire, his charity work, his love for family. The words felt hollow, like they belonged to someone else's father. Then Lucas stood for the eulogy, his voice smooth, his grief perfectly staged. He wove a tale of a father and son bound by business and loyalty, late nights at the office, shared dreams, a legacy built brick by brick. It was a beautiful lie, and the room ate it up. Dad valued loyalty above all, Lucas said, his eyes flicking toward me for a split second. He believed in showing up and honoring your family even when it's hard. The pause was deliberate, the accusation clear. I was the disloyal one, the daughter who'd walked away. My hands shook in my lap, rage and sorrow twisting together. Claire's hand found mine, her grip steady. You don't owe them an explanation, she whispered. They've chosen the easy story. Let them live with it. The reception was worse, a parade of forced smiles and quick exits. Aunt Valerie gave me a stiff hug, her eyes already elsewhere. Uncle Robert nodded once, then turned away. Every conversation I tried to start died in 3 words or less. I was pouring coffee, trying to steady my hands when Lucas approached, flanked by 2 cousins like he needed backup. Having fun? He asked, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. Must feel good to swoop in after all these years. I'm here for Dad, I said, my voice tight. Not for you. He smirked, cruel and confident. Sure. Or you're here to see what's in the will. Hate to break it to you, Em. There's nothing for you. The room seemed to tilt, heads turning our way. You don't know why I'm here, I said, louder than I meant. Oh, I do. He shot back. Where were you when Dad was in the hospital? When he needed rides to chemo? When he asked about you and I had to tell him you never called? I did call, I snapped, my voice breaking. I wrote. I sent cards. You know that. He raised an eyebrow, mocking. Funny. Dad never saw any of it. The lie was so blatant, so bold, it stole my breath. Uncle Robert stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Maybe you should go, Emily. You're not really part of this family anymore. The words landed like a slap, sharper than anything Lucas could have said. I wasn't Emily Carter, Dad's daughter. I was nothing. Claire pulled me away before I could lash out. leading me to the church garden where the air felt less suffocating. "They all hate me," I whispered, my hands shaking. "They don't know you," Claire said, her voice fierce. "They know Lucas's version. That's not the same thing." I nodded, but the hurt was bone deep. "There's a will reading tomorrow," I said. "Lucas made sure to tell me I'm out." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Then you go. You show up. You let them see you're not running from his lies." She was right, but fear gnawed at me. If the funeral had been this brutal, what would tomorrow bring? Back at the hotel that night, I sat by the window, the city lights blurring through my tears. Claire slept, but I couldn't. I pulled out an unsent letter I'd written to Dad, the words raw and aching. "I love you. I never stopped trying. Did you know? Did you ever know?" Reading it, something shifted in me. I'd lost Dad, my family, my place in their story, but I hadn't lost myself. Not yet. Tomorrow, at the will reading, I'd face Lucas, the family, and whatever truth Dad had left behind. Because if there was even a chance he'd remembered his Ellie bird, I was ready to hear it. And if Lucas thought he'd erased me, he was about to learn I wasn't done fighting. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to feel armored. Claire offered to come with me, but I told her no. This was something I had to face alone. She nodded, squeezing my hand, and I left the hotel alone, my heart hammering with every step toward the truth. The law offices of Dawson and Brooke sat high in a glass tower, one of Dad's buildings from years ago. Its steel and stone etched with the Carter name. The elevator ride felt endless, each ding of a passing floor like a countdown to judgment. When the doors opened, the conference room hit me like a wall of ice. Lucas was already there, sprawled at the head of a long mahogany table, legs crossed, hands steepled like he owned the place. Uncle Robert sat to his right, Aunt Valerie to his left, their faces set in stone. A handful of Carter and Sons board members filled the other seats, their eyes flicking to me, then away. At the far end, one empty chair waited, isolated, distant, a silent message. "You don't belong." I walked in, head high, and took my seat. The air buzzed with whispers, sharp and low, like wasps circling. Lucas's smile was thin, a blade disguised as courtesy. "Glad you could make it," he said, his tone dripping with anything but gladness. Mr. Dawson entered, his assistant trailing with a laptop and a slim black case. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice calm but firm. Richard Carter left not only a written will but a video message, recorded 3 months before his passing. Per his instructions, we'll start with the video. Lucas's brows twitched, a crack in his polished facade. "A video?" he said, forcing a chuckle. "That's unexpected." "He was clear," Dawson replied. "The video comes first, before any documents are discussed." Lucas leaned back, his fingers drumming a restless beat on the armrest. I caught it. The first sign he wasn't as sure as he seemed. My stomach twisted, hope and fear tangling together. What had Dad done? The lights dimmed, the assistant clicked play. And there he was, my father alive on the screen, sitting in his office in that navy suit he always wore for big meetings. His eyes, tired but sharp, looked straight into the camera, straight into me. My breath caught, and the room vanished. It was just me and him, like it used to be. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he began, his voice steady but heavy. "I made this because there are truths I didn't have the courage to face while I was here. Truths I owe you, especially my daughter Emily." The room went still. Lucas shifted, his chair creaking. My heart stopped. "Emily," Dad said, and his voice softened. "I'm sorry. I should have said it years ago. I believed lies about you, that you'd turned your back on us, that you didn't care. I let silence grow between us, thinking it was your choice. I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the room. Aunt Valerie's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Robert froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe as tears stung my eyes. 6 months ago, after a health scare, I was sorting through papers in Lucas's office. Dad continued. I found a drawer. Letters, cards, invitations, all from you, Emily. Unopened. Hidden. I confronted Lucas. He denied it, but I knew better. I hired an investigator. Lucas shot to his feet. This is absurd, he snapped, his voice tight. Sit down, Dawson said, unflinching. Your father's wishes were clear. Lucas sank back, his jaw clenched, eyes blazing. The board members exchanged glances, their whispers growing sharper. Dad's voice pressed on, each word a hammer. The investigator confirmed it. Emails intercepted, calls blocked, invitations trashed. Lucas built a story that you'd abandoned us, Emily, and I believed it. I failed you, and that's a weight I'll carry to my grave. My vision blurred, tears spilling over. All those years, every call unanswered, every letter ignored. It wasn't Dad. It was Lucas, stealing us from each other. But that wasn't all, Dad said, his tone hardening. The investigation uncovered more. Irregularities at Carter and Sons, unapproved contracts, cut corners on materials, falsified reports, even bribes to city officials. A board member gasped. Is this true, Lucas? Another demanded, voice rising. Lucas said nothing, his face pale, his hands gripping the table. I built this company on integrity, Dad said, looking into the camera like he could see us all. My son betrayed that. Not just the law, but our family's values. He paused, his eyes softening again. Which is why I've changed my will. The room froze, the air thick with shock. Lucas's knuckles whitened. To Lucas, Dad said, I leave a trust of $500,000, conditional on cooperating with a full audit and completing an ethics program. Lucas slammed his fist on the table. This is a joke, he shouted, his voice cracking. Dad's voice didn't waver. To Emily, I leave controlling interest in Carter and Sons, 51% ownership, along with the family estate and all personal holdings. No one moved. No one breathed. My hands trembled in my lap, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might break. Emily, Dad said, his voice breaking now, I also ask you to establish the Carter Foundation for the Arts, something I should have supported long ago. I see you now, Ellie Bird. I'm so proud of the woman you are. The screen went black. Silence swallowed the room, heavy and suffocating. Then chaos erupted. Voices overlapping, chairs scraping, accusations flying. Lucas rounded on Dawson. This is a fraud. I'll fight it. You can try, Dawson said calmly. But your father left evidence. Documents, recordings, notarized statements. Contesting this will trigger a legal investigation. You might not like what it finds. Lucas turned to me, his eyes wild, not with anger, but fear. For the first time, he had no words. He just grabbed his coat and stormed out. I stayed in my chair, the one they'd stuck me in to keep me small. But I wasn't small anymore. I was seen, and Dad had seen me. Aunt Valerie stood, her face a mix of guilt and shock. She met my eyes, then looked away, smoothing her jacket as she left. Uncle Robert followed Lucas without a glance. The board members lingered, murmuring, casting uncertain looks my way. Dawson cleared his throat. That concludes the reading. We can arrange private discussions if needed. I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the door. Each step felt like waking from a long, painful dream. In the hallway, Mr. Holloway, one of the board members, caught up to me. Ms. Carter, he said, his voice careful but firm. We'll need to talk soon. The company needs direction and answers. Answers. For the first time, I felt like I had them. In the lobby, Claire was waiting, her eyes searching mine. How'd it go? I couldn't speak. I just fell into her arms, sobbing, relief, grief, and something like hope all at once. She held me tight, letting me break. When I pulled back, I whispered, He saw me, Claire. He called me Ellie Bird. Her smile was soft, fierce. then it was worth it. Maybe it was. For years, Lucas had rewritten my story, painting me as the daughter who left, who didn't care. But Dad's truth had broken through, and now I stood in a new light. Not just his daughter, but his heir, his legacy. The road ahead would be messy. Legal battles, boardroom fights, a family that might never forgive me. But I was done being silenced. If you're reading this, let me ask you, has someone ever tried to erase your story? To make you feel like you didn't belong? If they have, hold on to this. The truth has a way of rising, no matter how deep it's buried. When it does, don't look away. Step into it. Claim it. Let the world see you. What would you have done in my shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts. The first board meeting after the will reading loomed like a storm, set for Monday morning. Barely 3 days after Dad's video turned my life inside out. Sleep was a stranger that night. I sat on the edge of the bed in his master bedroom, my bedroom now, in a house that still felt like it belonged to someone else. The silence was deafening, filled with echoes of a childhood when Dad called me Ellie Bird, and this place was home. Now, the cedar-scented air and the worn leather chair in his study were mine, but they didn't feel like mine. Not yet. I dressed in black, not for grief, but because it made me feel unbreakable, like armor against the judgment waiting downtown. Walking into the Carter and Sons boardroom was like stepping into a lion's den. Every eye locked onto me. Some curious, some skeptical, all heavy. The long mahogany table gleamed under the lights, the same table where Lucas had once ruled. His chair was empty now. I took it, my heart pounding but my face steady. The air buzzed with unspoken doubts. An artist? Richard's disappointment? She's running this? Mr. Hawthorne, the senior board member, cleared his throat. Let's begin. The room stayed cold, the mood stiff as we started. I felt their stares, their whispers itching at my skin. I didn't try to hide my inexperience. I'm not my father, I said, my voice clear despite the knot in my chest. I'm not here to pretend I know it all, but I know what Carter and Sons should be. Honest, innovative, accountable. That's what Dad wanted. That's what I'm here for. A few nodded, cautious. Others stayed blank, their eyes saying, "You don't do this." I didn't need their trust. Not yet. I just needed them to see I wasn't scare easy. The days that followed were a crash course in reality. I dove into the company's past, poring over project files, touring construction sites, asking questions until my throat was raw. Dad's lessons about timing, wait for the right pull, then act, guided me, even as his absence ached. I hired auditors to start the ethics review he'd mandated, knowing Lucas's fingerprints were everywhere. We found them. Rushed projects with shoddy materials, permits fudged, contracts with shady suppliers. Fixing it meant pulling out of deals, issuing apologies, and pouring money into repairs instead of growth. Investors grumbled. Some staff quit. Others pushed back, loyal to Lucas's old ways. But some, quietly, slowly, rallied behind me. A site manager slipped me a file on a flawed foundation Lucas had approved. A secretary shared stories of Dad's early days when integrity was his North Star. Their trust, small as it was, kept me going. It reminded me of the girl Dad believed in, the one who drew cities on his blueprints and dreamed big. Then the press got hold of the video. Within a day, headlines screamed, "Carter heiress takes reins after explosive will reveal." Sun oosted over fraud claims. Can an artist save a real estate empire? Reporters swarmed the office, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. They wanted dirt, a scandal to sink their teeth into. My inbox overflowed with interview requests, each one fishing for a soundbite to twist. I gave them something else. The truth. At a press conference, I faced the microphones, my hands steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. You've heard the rumors, I said. But Carter and Sons was built on values. Honesty, quality, community. I'm here to honor that, not with words, but with work. The room went quiet, then erupted with questions. I answered what I could, sidestepped what I didn't. That day, something shifted. Staff started calling me Miss. Carter, not her. Emails came with ideas, not complaints. One morning, I walked into the break room and stopped short. Someone had pinned up an old review of my art, a piece I'd painted years ago in Brooklyn. Scrawled in Sharpie across the top, Vision, Grit, Carter's Soul. I didn't know who did it, but I left it there. A quiet reminder I wasn't alone. Lucas, meanwhile, vanished. No calls, no emails, nothing. Mr. Dawson said he'd left the country. Spain, maybe, licking his wounds or dodging the fallout. I waited for an apology, some sign he felt the weight of what he'd done. Not just to me, but to Dad, to the company. It never came. That silence, more than anything, set me free. Lucas had stolen years from me and Dad, rewriting our story with lies, but he couldn't touch what came next. On what would have been Dad's birthday, I launched the Carter Foundation for the Arts. We turned the top floor of a renovated Carter building into a gallery, showcasing young Chicago artists. Dreamers like I'd been, hungry for a chance. At the ribbon cutting, I stood before a crowd of reporters, clients, and kids clutching sketchbooks, my voice steady but my heart full. Dad taught me to wait for the right moment, I said, but he also taught me to act when it comes. Strength isn't about control. It's about knowing who you are and standing tall. This foundation is for those who know who they are, even when the world tries to tell them otherwise. Afterward, an older man approached, his face weathered but familiar. Mr. Delaney, one of Dad's first foremen. He glanced at the paintings, then at me. "Your dad would have loved this," he said. "He always said you saw things he couldn't." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. He told me, in his own way. Not everyone's convinced I belong. Some board members still whisper. Investors still grumble. But I don't need their approval. For the first time, I believe in myself. The girl Dad called Ellie Bird. The woman he trusted with his legacy. Lucas tried to erase me, and for years I let him. But now, I'm writing my own story. If you've ever been pushed aside, told you're not enough, or had your truth buried, let this be your spark. You're still here. Your story's not over. Stand in it. Fight for it. Let it shine. What would you do with a second chance to be seen? I'd love to know. A year had passed since that day in the law office. Since Dad's video shattered the lies. Since Lucas's face drained of color. Since I stepped into a life I never imagined. 12 months of rebuilding Carter and Sons, of watching the Carter Foundation for the Arts bloom, of proving to myself I belonged. We'd just posted our strongest quarter yet, built on honesty and grit. At a gallery opening, a 17-year-old artist from the South Side, one of our grant recipients, sold her first painting. Her mother hugged me, tears streaming, and for a moment I felt Dad's pride shining through her. Some mornings I still woke up stunned this was my life. Then came the email. No subject from a generic address, but the name stopped me cold. Lucas. I stared at it, my coffee growing cold before I clicked. Emily, I don't expect a reply or forgiveness. I'll be in Chicago a few days. If you want to talk, I'm at the coffee shop on 8th, Tuesday, 10 a.m. If not, I get it. I read it again. And again. Lucas hadn't reached out since he stormed out of the will reading, not when the press tore him apart, not when the audits exposed his corners cut, not even when Aunt Valerie tried to soften his image, saying he was lost. A year of silence, and now this. I didn't reply. But Tuesday morning, my feet carried me to 8th Street, like some part of me needed to see who he was now. The coffee shop hadn't changed. Same cinnamon and espresso smell, same creaky floors, same sagging couches. Lucas sat in the corner, and the sight of him hit me hard. Not the polished king of Carter and Sons, but a man worn down. His hair was longer, his face softer, his confidence gone, like a suit that didn't fit anymore. He stood when he saw me, his voice quiet. "Emily." I nodded, sitting across from him. my hands clasped tight to keep them still. Silence stretched between us, heavy with a decade of pain. He looked at the table, then at me. "I didn't think you'd come." "Neither did I said, my voice steady but sharp. He swallowed, eyes dropping. "I'm not here to make excuses. What I did, everything I did, was wrong. The lies, the letters, keeping you from Dad." His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the boy he'd been, not the man who'd erased me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I see it now." I studied him, the weight of his words settling over me. All those years, every call he blocked, every letter he hid, every time he told Dad I didn't care, came rushing back. The silence between me and Dad, the one I'd blamed myself for, was his doing. "Why now?" I asked, my voice low. He hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his cup. "I saw the Madrid project on the news. The foundation. Your name everywhere. You're leading, Emily, really leading, and people believe in you. I used to think power was control, being the loudest in the room. But you do it quietly, and it's real." He gave a bitter laugh. "I'm further from who I wanted to be than ever." His words stirred something. Anger, pity, maybe both. "You lost everything," he said, his voice raw. "Not just the company, but Dad, me, the person I could have been if I hadn't—" He stopped, eyes glistening. "I needed you to know I'm sorry." For the first time, I believed him, but belief didn't erase the ache. I thought of Dad, of the fishing trips and porch sketches, of the silence Lucas built between us. "I'm not the girl you tried to bury," I said, my voice steady. "I'll never be her again." He nodded, slow and heavy. "Good." We sat in silence, not the warm kind Dad and I once shared, but one filled with ghosts. I stood, my heart heavy but clear. "Take care, Lucas." "You too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I walked out, the bell above the door jingling, and didn't look back. That afternoon I sat in Dad's study, the room untouched, his books, his desk, the faint cigar and paper smell. In the top drawer, I kept his journal, found hidden behind a panel months ago. I opened it to the last entry. "If I don't get to tell Emily in person, I hope she knows the truth." "I know, Dad," I whispered, tears falling. "And I'm still here." Outside, Chicago hummed, alive and moving. So was I. Lucas's apology didn't heal the past, but it freed me to keep writing my future. If you've ever faced someone who broke you, who came back asking for a moment you weren't sure you could give, you know that weight. That choice. Would you have gone? Would you have stayed? I'd love to hear your heart on this. Thank you for staying with me. Before you go, if this story touched you, if you want to hear more stories like this, please support our channel, Hidden Family Revenge Stories. Click the like button, subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful new episode about betrayal, truth, and emotional justice. That might just change the way you see family, forgiveness, and truth. Thank you, and see you in the next stories.